I'm super excited to have Van here. This is a series of conversations we're having with a few folks who graduated from Reed. And in particular, our students have been interested about, how they get from, A to Z. And in particular, in areas where people are successful with business or pre-health careers or other pre-professional careers. And so thanks for hanging out with me and sharing your story with the families we're working with.
I'm one of the owners and the master brewer at Gigantic Brewing Company in Southeast Portland. If you were to roll a golf ball down Steel Street, it would pretty much end at Gigantic, to tell you the truth.
And Steel Street runs up and down Reed College.
It's the northern border of Reed. Yeah. So we started Gigantic. I have a business partner named Ben Love, who's a local boy. And we started Gigantic in 2012. People constantly ask, "Oh, wow, so you started it really close to Reed?" And I was like, "No, I did not intend that to be the case." We found a really great building with a really great lot and a really great landlord, and it fit for having a brewery. And that's really why we're there. But it is nice to be close to the, as Carl Stevens used to say, the Little Red Schoolhouse. It's nice to have like the staff come in and professors and things like that, older students.
Well, it's funny because you're right down the street from the college, but that's certainly not where you started when you left.
Right when I left school, I was rebuilding the engine on Jeff Parker's Ford Tempo of the economics department. That was my first job out of college.
And Jeff Parker, the economics professor.
Yeah. And then, but really what I did is I started a PhD program in economics at the University of Minnesota. So I left Oregon just a few months after graduating, moved to the cities, Twin Cities, that is, and started an academic life. And I was at Minnesota for about 2.5 years, and then just kind of realized it wasn't the right thing for me. And I took a job at a union shop. A big brewery that's no longer there. Was called Minnesota Brewing Company. It was an old Schmidt plant.
It's sort of interesting. You're in a PhD program. I'm assuming things are going well, and you shift.
Yeah.
What is that moment like? I mean, were you nervous? Did you feel confident? Had Reed prepared you for this idea that you might get into the world and want to do something different?
The Reed experience teaches you to look at not one thing, but a lot of things. I really began to question why economics is the way it is and what my interests in economics were. And I'm not talking about some sort of modern 2021, does the theories of economics affect our attitudes towards market-based economies and capitalism? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what I liked about economics was the fact that if you look at the social sciences, and people can argue with me if they want, I'm willing to have this argument, it's fine. If you look at the social sciences, most of them start at the top and work down. They assume the group and they extrapolate the individual, right? Political science is looking at politics and then how that affects the individual. Anthropology, culture, and how that affects the individual. Sociology, right? Economics assumes the individual and extrapolates the group. It has a bottom-up view of social science. To me, that's the fundamental difference in what economics is. It's not any of these other things. Once you start getting into truly modern economics, you realize it's not just about the economy and general equilibrium and P's and Q's and whatnot, that you're using a methodology to study social interactions. Right? And that is what I found interesting and powerful. But I found that, frankly, some of the fundamental assumptions and methods, I just didn't like the way they worked. And I lost my faith in those methods being able to answer the kind of questions that I might potentially be interested in looking at.
Can you give me a really concrete example and a simple example of starting with the individual, and working the other way?
when you go to the University of Minnesota, one of the first things you'll learn is preference theory. And preference theory is very simple. You make three basic assumptions, and on those three basic assumptions, you start to build out how you can have a whole series of economic mathematical models. And those symbols are super easy. It's just that preferences are reflexive, transitive, and total. They're reflexive. If I prefer A over B, then I prefer B less to A. Right? It's reflective. It goes back and forth, right? It doesn't change. They're transitive. If I prefer A to B and B to C, I would prefer A to C. Right? And they're total. Any two things I can have a preference relationship with. Any two things. It doesn't matter. That preference could be equal. That's fine. That's part of that reflexive. If I like A as much as B, then I like B as much as A. Right? And it could be a less than or equal to, or it can be greater than or equal to. It can be right, but the point is they can compare any two things. You start with that, and that's for an individual's decision
versus the likeliness of a group,
and
having chosen A or having chosen B.
Right, and then what you do is if that's the case, you can start to then show preference relationships, and you can build those preference relationships into group dynamics.
You are exemplifying what I enjoy most about Reedies, but it is the true actualization of the information they learn. They do not just spit this stuff back. It becomes a foundational piece of their understanding of the world. And as a result, you can almost reflectively reach back to a theory you learned decades ago and tell it back to me like you're the professor.
Yeah, it's been like 28 years since I did that. But anyway.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. I mean, and I mean that sincerely. So what did you say yes to read?
I wasn't really the most self-aware senior in high school. I was very conflicted. I grew up in Orange County in the 80s. And so it was a very conservative, white, a very money-oriented place. Weirdly, the fundamental political moment in my life was walking to high school because my high school was surrounded by strawberry fields. And I would walk through the strawberry fields like a lot of kids did. And I would see all these Latino, almost for sure migrant workers, literally running all day with flats of strawberries, trying to make enough money to make it pay off, and stooping down to the ground. I mean, just brutal labor. And then seeing my classmates and the other kids in the class, like laughing at them, making fun of them, and I was just like, there is something fundamentally wrong with this equation. So between that experience and like the punk rock and the Billy Bragg and introduction to British politics and all that sort of stuff, I was really torn between what I was developing into and what I had come out of. Right? The thing was, I fit in really well with Reed. I didn't understand that I did.
Yeah.
Because part of me that was sort of like, well, when I get out of college, I'm going to be a stockbroker. Like, I didn't know. I hadn't figured it out yet, even though I'd had this experience walking through strawberry fields and seeing some of this horrible classism and racism, right? I didn't know how much it had affected me already. It was really the first week on campus that I really finally got it.
Yeah.
I just really wasn't sure until I got to campus. Then I got to campus and I was just like, holy, no one's going to call me weird here. This is amazing. Because that's all I'd ever been called my entire life.
Yeah, but you thought deeply. If these were thoughts you were having, were either sitting in the classroom or walking through the field, you thought deeply about your place in the world. We talk about that in the admission process. Students that understand their place in the world.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And we find that those students are naturally attracted to this place where they can actually have those conversations that feel like real conversations, not the surface level.
Yeah. The thing that you realize pretty quickly on campus is, well, first of all, Reed students go to Reed to learn. I have a lot of friends at this point who went to a lot of schools, and it's stunning. You realize that I would say that the vast majority of college kids in the United States go as a socialization experience. They're not, are they going to learn there? Yes. Are they mainly going for the socialization into the great American middle class or the attempt to do that? Yeah, that's kind of what most kids are doing. But like every single readie that stays around is absolutely no. You figure out that's.
Yeah, there's an intellectual curiosity.
Yeah, intellectual demand, really.
Yeah.
It's. I have a friend from high school that strangely I do some business with, and his son is thinking about going to Reed, and I'm just like, Dave, let me talk to him. And when I'm done talking to him, you can talk to one of my brewers who graduated like 7 years ago.
What I tell people is our goal, particularly in the admission process, is to help you make an informed decision. It's not to say come to Reed. It's for you to know exactly what you'd get into if you say yes, and to give you space to say yes.
Yep.
When you look back on your Reed career and what you learned, what did Reed give you that you see yourself applying on a regular basis?
I still think of myself as a brewer first and foremost. And within brewing.
Why is that?
It's because of who I am. Brewing is my vocation. It is my vocation in the sense that Martin Luther used it. And I don't mean this in a religious way. I'm talking about the Luther-Erasmus debates. And Luther had this concept of vocation as your calling, that what you are meant to be doing. I started homebrewing, and it was like there was a language that I didn't know I could speak. The flavors in beer are something I intuitively understand, have always understood, and always will understand. And the process of brewing and how to manipulate the process of brewing is something that works with me. It's not just, it's the brewing is a complicated, multidisciplinary endeavor. To be really good at it as a small brewer, you have to be mechanically adept. You have to be know some decent chemistry. You have to know some decent biology. You have to understand flavor. You have to know all these things, and you have to make it work together. And you have to learn how to do it consistently and whatnot. I also like being a brewer because it gives me the chance to be an educator. And you really, in order to be good at it, you really need a mentor. You need someone to teach you.
So I've been a Gigantic, number one, it feels like every time I go there, it's family, and I feel like there's, whatever you did to foster that, it's fantastic.
It's the thing that I am personally most proud of about the entire thing. Is honestly, is that we created a legitimate, genuine pub. I learned to drink publicly in England. I did not do my junior year at Reed. I went to the London School of Economics. And whereas that was not exactly the most satisfying academic experience, I learned about the pub. And it has become incredibly formative and important to me. And understanding what a pub really is. I think this is fair to say, of everyone I've known who's gone to Reed, it's been so fundamental to their development and life experience that it is the only way we can know how Reed affected us would be to have a second to us to know what would happen otherwise, right? It's too difficult to disentangle yourself from what formed you. Reed gave me the place and the time to be free enough to investigate myself enough and to have a chance to have an intellectually curious time. It gave me that time to be able to connect all those things or to do that. And then once you start doing that, you never stop doing it. It's just something you do. And when that's something you do, it gives you big advantages.
You want to know what's interesting? I spoke, so the first one of these I did about an hour ago, and I asked them a similar question, and their initial answer was almost identical to your answer. Well, of course, this is the path I took. And the only way to evaluate this is if I took a different path. And I thought then what I thought at this time, which was, oh, you Reedy. You're like, well, of course I'm here because I happen to be here.
Yeah.
Reedies have been put in a different position to be able to make abstract and cross-disciplinary connections in a way that's almost seamless and seems almost instantaneous.
Yeah.
You all have captured information and integrated it into your understanding more so than other folks. And so when I talk about capacities, do you have any doubt that if you wanted to go and be a lawyer, you could do that today or could have done that after school?
No, there's a ton of things. I mean, I could have been an economist. There's no doubt in my mind about that. There's a lot of things I could have done. I have a vocation. Beer is a crucial cultural touchstone for a large number of people in this world, even for people who, in the grand scheme of history, beer was not, part of their lives. It has become a cultural touchstone. And understanding that, I think, is also important in terms of what we do as brewers and brewery owners.
Do you ever use your beer to tell a story?
Beer kind of is always a story. It's either the story of the making of the beer, the story of the history of the beer, the story that gets told over drinking the beer. I would argue that successful breweries do not have a transactional relationship with their customers. They have a relationship with their customers. Mm-hmm. This isn't just about sales. This is about trust and integrity, and it is about honesty, and it is about the story that we tell that you want to know about, and the story that you tell yourself, and the story that you tell your friends, and the stories that we tell each other when we have beer.